and in a moment when gender equality gaps are undeniable. 2020 as a pivotal year for the accelerated realization of gender equality and women empowerment has put us in front of a big challenge such as COVID-19, which has exacerbated the gender inequality. This conference is an opportunity for the OSCE community to take stock on the implementation of our commitments and a moment of thorough reflection on progress since the adoption of 2004 OSCE Gender Action Plan and our second Gender Equality Review Conference of 2017. This event should help us find ways to consolidate the progress made and address remaining gaps with renewed energy and determination. Gender equality is a priority of our change. We believe that the OSCE, with its commitments, is well placed in promoting more systematic implementation and targeted activities in priority areas for gender equality in its 3 dimensions. High-level opening will set the stage for the discussions over the course of the day and a half and focus on the link between the OSCE's unique concept of comprehensive security and the extensive commitments on gender equality. It will be followed by a review session where progress, gaps, opportunities, and steps for future OSCE commitments to gender equality will be assessed and discussed. And part of the conference will consist on 3 thematic sessions on women's participation in the security sector, women's economic empowerment, and women's participation in public and political life. Sessions are designed to be interactive and thought-provoking. In this context, delegations and participants attending the event are strongly encouraged to engage in an active dialogue with the speakers throughout the conference, asking questions and providing recommendations on how OSCE can deliver more on accelerating progress in gender equality. This session will be recorded and live streamed on the OSCE live event page. To support the online connection, all participants should turn off their camera. Participants are also invited to mute their microphone. If you have any technical issues, please privately message Giacomo at the OSCE OSG on the Zoom chat function. If you have any general comment or question for the interest of all speakers and participants, feel free to write it in the chat, with the exception of this session where only the speakers will speak. If you want to follow the meeting in Russian or English, please select the right channel. Before starting our session today, I would like to take the opportunity to convey a special thanks to the delegations of Austria, Finland, Norway, and Slovakia for their generous contribution. And we're honored to have a special video message from the President of the Republic of Finland, Mr. Sauli Niinisto.
Ladies and gentlemen, this year is an important milestone for gender equality. It is the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. It is 20 years since the UN Security Council resolution on women, peace and security was adopted. And 5 years ago, we agreed on gender equality and sustainable development goal number 5. We have made a lot of progress, but the work is by no means complete. I'm alarmed by the ongoing attempts to challenge women's and girls' rights. We must make sure that gender equality goes forward, not backward. Let me highlight 3 ways in which we in the OSCE can work together for this goal. Firstly, we must deliver on the Security Council Resolution 1325. Sustainable peace is not possible without women. Already in 2013, Finland, together with Austria, Kazakhstan and Turkey, suggested the creation of an OSCE-wide action plan on women, peace and security. We should finally move ahead with this plan. Secondly, we have to support women's participation, especially in the economy. Gender stereotypes still hinder women for obtaining leadership positions. Sustainable development is not possible without gender equality. For Finland, gender equality has been a key part of our story as a nation from the very beginning. Thirdly, we need to do more to combat violence against women. This has become an ever bigger problem during the pandemic. We have to start by keeping the promises we have already made. Most importantly, this means implementing the Istanbul Convention. These three themes have been my commitments as a long-time He4C impact champion. I believe that they also serve as a valuable compass for the entire OSCE area on the long road towards gender equality. I wish you all a successful conference.
I would like to express my gratitude to the delegation of Finland at the OSCE for making this message by the President of the Republic, Excellency Mr. Niisto. Our next distinguished speaker that will address the conference is Ms. Ogerta Manastriliu, the Minister of Health and Social Protection of Albania. Until yesterday, she was planning to participate herself, but unfortunately, due to the position that she's holding and the COVID situation, she very kindly sent us a pre-recorded video message made last night, late night. Please, Secretariat.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Albanian OSCE Chairmanship 2020 is very pleased to be in the lead of organizing the third OSCE Gender Equality Review Conference. I'd like to extend my gratitude to the President of Finland for this message conveyed to the conference and for his personal commitment to gender equality. Gender equality in the OSCE region is a cornerstone and a crucial feature to inclusive democracy and concept of comprehensive security. The mutually reinforcing relationship between gender equality and democracy relies on the respect for human rights, women empowerment, and meaningful participation, as well as equal opportunities and social inclusion. And right up front, I'd like to share my personal belief that gender equality should be safeguarded as goal of democracy. Excellencies, this year the international community is commemorating the 25th anniversary of Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action as the most visionary agenda the global world have had for achieving gender equality. This year's observance falls at the beginning of a new decade where we have seen remarkable progress on ensuring the rights of women and their leadership. Today, women are public and silent accelerators of economic, social, and political change. But the changing nature of social, economic, and cultural landscape gives to all of us another opportunity to assess better the progress in achieving gender equality. While we celebrate a huge progress in the steps forward, the shift in our society's mindset and behavior is still slow. Dear colleagues, COVID-19 pandemic is the worst human and humanitarian crisis that has shaken globally the founding structures of our societies, hitting again the most vulnerable ones. Unfortunately, among the most vulnerable are again women and girls. While women worldwide turn out to be among the highest providers of human security during the pandemic in multiple roles of front workers in responding to the crisis, the COVID-19 exposed them even more towards gender-based and domestic violence, threatening security and violating human rights. As the 2020 chairmanship in office, Albania committed in addressing the implementation of violence against women in the OSCE area. I'd like to underscore here the chairperson, Prime Minister Rama's words that violence must have no space in our societies. Yet, this is another crucial moment for all of us to reflect on how easily are undermined the global achievements towards gender equality and how easily exacerbate the existing gender inequality. This is also an alarm call to the utmost importance for women leadership and the necessity for gender-sensitive approaches and responses to the crisis. Distinguished participants, the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality and women empowerment requires bold policy implementation. The challenges of structural inequalities women and girls consistently face in fulfilling their potential are long-standing within our communities. Increasing women participation through inclusive approaches everywhere is also the best way in strengthening the democracy and in upholding the human rights principles. A sustainable society is also a vibrant one because of women empowerment. Women empowerment cannot be achieved without equal opportunities, access to resources and education, right to your own benefits and economic chances. And providing those is a direct responsibility of all the policy makers worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, as the largest regional security organization in the world, the OSCE is committed in its 2004 Action Plan for the Promotion of Gender Equality to advance the participation pillar of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda on the role of women in inter alia the prevention of conflicts and post-conflict reconstruction and rehabilitation. In this regard, gender equality, women empowerment, and their meaningful inclusion are essential elements of the OSCE concept of comprehensive security. Thus, the meaningful participation is at the core of comprehensive security, and women empowerment is at the grassroots of peaceful societies. Dear colleagues, on October 31, the global community will mark the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the landmark United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. OSCE region can gain the momentum and recommit towards its full implementation for the benefit of the achievement of sustainable peace through inclusiveness, transparency and gender justice. Thank you for your attention.
As I announced, we were looking forward to have the minister participating live online, but we hope in your understanding for that impossibility. Now I'd like to give the floor to our speaker, Her Excellency Ambassador Kelly Curry. She's the Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issue from the United States. Your Excellency, the screen is yours. I hope Ambassador Curry can join us. I see her online. Colleagues from the US delegation, if you can help us with that connection. Okay, let us give some time to Ambassador Curry. Probably the connection will come later. I will continue with Ms. Asa Regner, the United Nations Assistant Secretary General and the Deputy Executive Director for UN Women. Regner, please, you have the screen.
Good morning, everybody. Unfortunately, I can't start my video myself, but I hope you can see me. I'm very happy to be... Sorry about that. Now you can see me. So good morning from New York, and thank you so much for having me. UN Women is delighted to be part of this conference, and we're also really happy about the theme of the conference, which is about the OSCE Action Plan for Promotion of Gender, and I understand with a focus on implementation, because we have learned this year in all the reviews we've done of both of the Beijing Platform for Action 25 years later. We had the General Assembly, President of the General Assembly high-level event on that. And we have also made a review of the 20 years later of the 1325 resolution of the Security Council. And we know that although there are important gains made, implementation is lacking when it comes to gender equality in the world. So we are really thrilled to be part of this, and we want to be very active partners to OSCE. We are actually just 2 days ahead. In 2 days, the open debate on women, peace and security will be held in the Security Council on the 20 years after the adoption of the landmark resolution 1325. So we think this is a very timely discussion. So on a positive note, we know that when we go back to the Beijing Platform for Action, we have at least 2 outstanding areas with success. It is about girls' education and enrollment in school, as well as lower levels of maternal mortality. We also know that a lot of legislation is in place that wasn't there 25 years ago. In fact, 274 legal and regulatory reforms have been introduced in more than 130 countries since then. All of this is obviously good news. However, we know that when it comes to many important areas, we have not reached the goals, we're sometimes far from them. And as I said, implementation and lacking implementation and funding is lacking. Also, as you pointed out, Mr. Chair, we also saw that the COVID impact on women's and girls' situations in all sectors almost have been highly impacted by the COVID socioeconomic effects. So if I go through some of the areas, we can see that when it comes to the OSCE's, one of the OSCE focuses, the security sector. We see that women's participation in all over the world, but also in Europe and Central Asia, women's participation in peace processes remains low. Women also remain underrepresented in the military, police, and diplomatic corps. Most notably in conflict-affected countries in the OSCE region as well. But it is encouraging, on the other hand, to see that over 60% of OSCE participating states have national action plans in relation to the 1325 resolution. However, we also know that only 8 out of 36 national action plans in the region were budgeted when they were adopted. So we think, more commitment of key stakeholders, decision makers, and governments in relation to this, not only in this region, but also in this region. In the 2020 report on women, peace and security, which will be described more in detail, both by the Secretary General and the Executive Director of UN Women on Thursday in the open debate, There you will hear that they call for radical action over the next decade to integrate women into all aspects of peace. Otherwise, we risk a continuous state of insecurity, instability, and even more protracted conflicts. And I think also that women's leaderships have been very visible in recent developments in the Europe and Central Asia region. And I think that the Secretary General's call comes timely if we want to ensure sustainable peace and security. Also, when it comes to economic empowerment, which falls under one of the dimensions of the OSCE, we see uneven progress. We also know that in Europe and Central Asia, only 45% of working age women are actually actively engaged in the labor market, compared to 70% of men in the same situation and age. Also, women have lower income levels, and there are also paid gap, and women are also unproportionately responsible or made responsible for unpaid domestic and care work. We have asked from UN Women's side, not specifically in this region, but in the world, women in conflict zones and what they needed from their own point of view during the COVID lockdowns. And what they pointed to most of all were actually, most important to them, their own income. Because with their own income, they can solve other problems and they can be independent, for example, of violent spouses or partners. So they said their first concern was lack of income. Their second concern was violence levels from their partners, although obviously the violence levels is a great problem and plague and torture to them, but without income, they can do even less against it. They were also very concerned about the difficulty to access health facilities and other help in turn when COVID struck or when they were victims of violence. Another important area is, of course, women's participation and political decision-making. Women's participation in political and public life, which is linked to the important human dimension of the OSCE. In 1995, we had 12 women heads of state or government. Today, we have 22 in the world, and that still makes only 7% of heads of state women and 6% of heads of governments women in the world. And also the women's part of the parliamentarians in the world has stagnated around 25% in the world, although women are increasingly highly educated and have a lot of experience from management and leadership to a much larger extent than 25 years ago. So I think we have to discuss how to go further, as you will do in this conference. A lot that is needed is actually leadership and political will aiming at gender equality. We need funding, we need action for implementation. So next year at the Commission on the Status of Women, we will dedicate that session to women's full and effective participation and decision-making in public life, as well as political life. That will also raise the important questions of women's leadership in civil society and the defense of women activists, which is a very important part also of decision-making and making that possible. My last point, Mr. Chair, is also to tell you that we have taken an initiative together with member states, with civil society, with the private sector called Generation Equality Forum. In this, two forums will be held in Mexico and Paris in 2021. And we have also decided on 6 action areas to accelerate and put pressure on implementation and funding for gender equality to make more happen. And we are very happy to be working together with OSCE and other partners in that work. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to the discussions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Regner. Thank you so much for your remarks. Now I'd like to make another try to connect with Ambassador Curry. seems that the OSCE connection is a bit difficult. But if not, the colleagues from the US delegation can tell us when Ambassador Curry can solve the difficulty of connecting with us. I will continue with Ambassador Tula Uriola, the officer in charge, Secretary General and Director of the OSCE Conflict Prevention Center, for her remarks. Dear Tula, Ambassador Uriola, please, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. So esteemed fellow panelists, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, now allow me to begin by thanking the Albanian chairpersonship for organizing this important conference, and congratulations, Ambassador Hassani, dear Igli, for providing us with such an interesting agenda and impressive list of speakers. The struggle to achieve gender equality is one of the most important efforts of our era. And from the OSCE prism, it's indisputable that gender equality is inseparably intertwined with achieving peace, security, and stability in our region and beyond. When women participate equally in society, in political life, in the economy, and in peace processes, we all benefit. I'm deeply satisfied that the OSCE has taken the topic seriously already for many years, so let me focus on this. Now, back in 2004, the OSCE took a decisive action to achieve gender equality. The 2004 OSCE Action Plan for the Promotion of Gender Equality represents both the culmination of a process and a new beginning. The process actually dates back to the 1999 Istanbul Summit, where participating states recognized that women's full and equal exercise of their human rights is essential to achieve a more peaceful, prosperous, and democratic OSCE region. They committed to making equality between women and men an integral part of policies, both in our societies and within the organization. The following year, UN Security Council Resolution 1325 recognized that the equal participation and full involvement of women in all efforts to maintain and promote peace and security are essential to their success and sustainability. So the 2004 OSCE Action Plan was built on well-prepared ground. Later, our participating states reaffirmed their commitment in the 2010 Astana Summit Declaration, which affirms that equality between women and men is an integral part of the OSCE's cross-dimensional, comprehensive, and cooperative approach to security. With the adoption of the Astana Declaration, the OSCE initiated a process to strengthen the organization's capacities to effectively respond to both old and new challenges to our common security. Gender equality as a key element of our holistic understanding of security is an integral part of this. So, excellencies and dear participants, the OSCE Action Plan for the Promotion of Gender Equality has had a profound impact on how the OSCE views security and how we develop our policies, our programs, and projects. It has helped to achieve progress towards more equitable societies in our participating states, and it has promoted, or rather prompted, key changes to the organization itself. In July, I had the pleasure to present to the Permanent Council a special progress report highlighting the main results that have been achieved since the second Gender Equality Review Conference in 2017. And I was glad to note that in certain areas, implementation of the action plan has accelerated in the last 3 years. But much work still needs to be done if we are to effectively tackle the root causes of gender equality, or rather gender inequality, I should say. And today's conference provides a comprehensive and detailed overview of where we have made progress, as well as the gaps that still need to be filled. And more importantly, it will point the way forward. Now, allow me to briefly highlight a few of the key areas where progress has been achieved. In the past 3 years, major steps have been taken to prevent and combat violence against women and girls. At the political level, the 2018 Ministerial Council adopted an important decision on preventing and combating violence against women. We should all be proud of this accomplishment, which was the outcome of years of work by participating states with support from OSCE executive structures. This decision is particularly relevant now, given the alarming increase in domestic violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. We also concluded, or rather conducted, a landmark OSCE-led survey on violence against women, which generated important data on the prevalence of violence against women in Eastern and Southeastern Europe, both in conflict and non-conflict settings. The survey's findings have been widely disseminated, raising awareness, encouraging prevention, and supporting the development of effective strategies and improved policies and services. Now, turning to the organization itself. In the past 3 years, we have made slow but steady progress towards achieving gender parity. The Secretariat Gender Parity Strategy, which aims to achieve parity on all staff levels by 2026, represents a major milestone. We have already reached parity at the director level, and many steps are being taken to accelerate progress toward parity at all other staff levels. We've also made notable progress in institutionalizing gender mainstreaming across all OSCE executive structures. And as a result, an increasing number of projects and programs across the 3 dimensions are now gender mainstreamed. Most executive structures now have gender action plans, and every executive structure is represented in our organization-wide Gender Focal Point Network, which is a key institutional tool for sharing good practices in gender mainstreaming. So as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of UNSCR 1325, I'm pleased to report that the OSCE executive structures have stepped up their support for implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We're also increasing our efforts to broaden women's role in the economic sphere and in political decision-making. Ladies and gentlemen, although we have been making steady progress towards gender equality, we do still face significant challenges as well, and I will briefly mention 2. Throughout our region and across the globe, the COVID-19 pandemic has indeed exacerbated gender inequalities by aggravating pre-existing gender-based economic disparities. It has also led to more gender-based violence, including domestic and online violence. And looking ahead, we need to pay more attention to the gender implications of the pandemic and to do more to mitigate its impact on women and to provide adequate gender-sensitive responses to the crisis. But we also need a culture shift. We cannot achieve peace and prosperity in our region until everyone is equal. Gender equality is a human right, and it's an intrinsic part of our comprehensive approach to security, to which all participating states have repeatedly reaffirmed their commitment. But we need sustainable change in the persistent drivers of gender inequality, such as unequal power relations, deeply rooted gender stereotypes, and attitudes and behaviors that condone discrimination against women. We need this kind of cultural shift in our societies, and we also need it in our organization. We need to lead by example, by providing a working environment where all staff feel included, valued, and supported, and where women and men have equal opportunities to contribute and to succeed. And we've already instituted a strict policy of zero tolerance for any form of harassment, including sexual harassment, but more insidious challenges to an inclusive work environment, such as sexist attitudes and behaviors, persist. So we need to do more to raise awareness and to change mindsets. In closing, I hope that this conference will provide us with new ideas and concrete solutions to accelerate the implementation of our commitments to gender equality and a new impetus for meaningful action. So let me end by wishing us interesting conversations and good outcomes. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Jurula. Thank you very much, dear Tula, for your remarks. Now I think we have the possibility of connecting with Ambassador Curry. Please, the screen is yours.
I am going,
we hear you. We can see you, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I can't see myself, so I wasn't sure if you could see me. Thank you so much for having me here today. Sorry for being a little bit delayed. We are really thrilled to be part of this discussion today because this is such an important topic for our office and for this administration. When President Trump signed into law the Women, Peace, and Security Act of 2017, the United States became the first country in the world to pass comprehensive national level legislation on women, peace, and security. And then in 2019, President Trump created the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative, which is our first ever whole of government effort to advance women's economic empowerment. In the first year of that initiative alone, 12 million women were reached by US government programs and partnerships. Today, through the State Department alone, the United States has ongoing women, peace, and security engagements in more than 30 countries in conjunction with more than 10 regional and international organizations. And we're thrilled to be working with the OSCE as well. Our efforts to empower women to be agents of change in their communities around the world are more important than ever today, as the previous speaker mentioned. We definitely recognize the disproportionate impact that COVID-19 is having on women and girls around the world, especially those who are experiencing spikes in gender-based violence, whose jobs and livelihoods are often the first to go as in the economic downturn, and who bear a larger burden of the increased care and household work that has come with lockdowns and stay-at-home orders. We urge all OSCE participating states to seek to ensure that the gains made for women are not lost during these challenging times, and that's certainly what we're doing in the United States. As you all know, 20 years ago this month, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 1325, recognizing the importance of women's meaningful participation in global security and peace efforts. The United States is proud to say that we've led the charge on this effort even before UNSCR 1325 and definitely since. We further affirmed this commitment with the release of our most recent national level strategy on women, peace, and security last year. And I really also want to talk about also want to call attention to the 4 implementation plans that our main agencies, my agency, the Department of State, the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, and the U.S. Agency for International Development have put together to make sure that we don't just have a strategy that lives on paper, but one that lives through our foreign policy and national security infrastructures and is part of our day-to-day implementation. So we're working really hard to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get the women, peace, and security agenda woven into the fabric of our national security and foreign policy. And part of that is looking beyond the traditional areas of work, such as making sure that women are able to participate in peace negotiations in Afghanistan, something we're very, strongly supporting and working very hard to enable, making sure that women are able to have access to services when they are victims of sexual violence and armed conflict, and that they are able to seek justice for the perpetrators of those crimes. And those are strong efforts that the United States supports around the world, from Burma to Syria to Yemen. And we are proud of the partnerships that we have on the ground across all of these traditional women, peace, and security agendas. We're also really pleased about how together our women, peace, and security, our women's economic empowerment agendas cut across the variety of challenges that women in the developing world and women in crisis and conflict affected states are facing. So we feel like we take a holistic and strong approach to these issues, and are also working inside of our own agencies to make sure that our personnel, our training, our preparation for diplomats when they go out in the field, our work with our combatant commands around the world, our peacekeeping training, all of these things are integrated into a holistic approach to support women, peace, and security at home and abroad. Which brings us to one of a threat that Ambassador Gilmore mentioned earlier today, that many people have trouble understanding as a threat to women, peace, and security. So I want to lay out a little bit about why we see the Chinese Communist Party's attack on women and girls in Xinjiang and communities in Xinjiang as a threat, as part of our women, peace, and security agenda, and why it's so critical to us. We see these atrocities that are taking place in Western China, in Xinjiang, where mass detention, mass surveillance, family separation, forced population control, forced labor, and other abuses are taking place on a scale that has not been seen since World War II. And I think, sometimes the Chinese accuse us of having a Cold War mentality. I think we actually have to go back a little bit further to World War II, and they can definitely accuse us of having a World War II mentality when it comes to the abuses that they're committing in Xinjiang today. Because we are seeing camps, we're seeing forced labor, we're seeing the monetization of repression to use forced labor to undermine labor markets around the world in a way that we haven't seen since World War II. So I think that we need to look at this as the threat to international peace and security that it is. And we also need to look at it as the gravest threat to women going on right now, especially when we talk about how women are being targeted with forced sterilization, forced abortion, and forced population control, and the removal of their children, efforts to cut cultural transmission from mother to child, and intervention in family life on a granular level that is unprecedented. So I think we need to really think about what this means for the global peace and security architecture when you have a member of the P5 of the Security Council that is bound by the Women, Peace and Security Act, is bound by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and is bound by the UN Charter, and is conducting these activities targeting a vulnerable minority within its borders, and continues to do so without much international sanction. I'm proud to say that the United States has sanctioned individuals and entities within the Chinese Communist Party's infrastructure for these attacks on families, on Uyghurs, on this community. And we are virtually alone in the world in doing so. And so we continue to work and rally our allies and our friends. And we're, again, proud to call Albania into that group. And we know that they've paid the price for this. We've seen Albania be subject to tremendous pressure, threats, and reprisals from the Chinese Communist Party for daring to stand up for human rights in China. So we know these are not easy decisions for countries to make, but what is at risk right now if these things continue to go unchecked is the very normative framework of human rights that this organization has stood for since its founding. And if we think about the role that the OSCE has played historically in bringing about the triumph of the democratic values and human rights values that we as nations hold dear, it's absolutely essential that this organization be involved in looking at what is going on, and that the members of this organization take a stand and look at this in a very serious and profound way. We also continue to face such, one of the things that we've learned is that when countries abuse the rights of their own citizens, those abuses rarely stay contained within that country. They tend to spill over into other contexts. We see this profoundly with Iran, for instance, where we have a regime that profoundly abuses its own population, but they're not content to just terrorize the women of their own country. They are involved in terrorizing women in Syria, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, in Lebanon, where you see instability in Iraq, all around Iran. You can bet that there is an Iranian hand at work there, creating that misery and spreading chaos and instability that, again, affects women and children most profoundly. So I think that we really have to work, especially when the UN will not act. And the UN does seem quite paralyzed, especially when it comes to dealing with these member states, whether it's Iran, Venezuela, or China. When the UN mechanisms break down, we have to act as a regional organization and as a values-based organization. So I think that I'll close by saying that we obviously see advancing women's rights as a global challenge and not just one nation's mandate, but it does require us to collaborate and cooperate with one another and with our partners and allies around the world. There are areas where we disagree, and I recognize those, and we often have very difficult conversations with our allies, especially many of our OSCE allies who have different views than we do on some issues that affect women. But we see the areas where we have common ground as far greater, and areas where we should be working and building out with our cooperation and focusing on those areas that are the gravest threats to women and girls around the world and the gravest threats to the progress that we've made on the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. So with that, I'm happy to say that the United States really continues to lead. I call attention to our statement on women, peace, and security last week, and our belief that the OSCE is most effective when it's guided by the example and the political will of its participating states. And so it's incumbent on each of us to provide that leadership and to promote equality in the peace and security fields at home and in our various bilateral and multilateral relationships, and to challenge ourselves as we look at these really difficult problems where the OSCE has been a critical force for good in the world before and can be again. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate and be with you today. It's my honor.
Very much, Ambassador, and thank you for being with us today. Last but not least, in this high-level panel is Ms. Katarzyna Garta-Prace, the first Deputy Director of the OSCE Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. Dear Katarzyna, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, dear Igli, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends. On behalf of the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this third OSCE Gender Equality Review Conference. I would like to express my appreciation to the Albanian Chair in Office and to colleagues from the gender section of the OSCE Secretariat, and also to my own able and expert team in ODIHR for all efforts in organizing this important event. And I also would like to express my appreciation to all of you who joined us here today. It is to me a clear sign that we all wish to achieve the strong OSCE commitments on gender equality and gender parity, both as OSCE participating states and as OSCE executive structures. Obviously, a lot of what I wanted to say has already been said, because that's usually the fate of the last speaker. But I would still like to talk a little bit about why gender equality is so important today. And I would like to start by saying that our societies across the OSCE region really struggle with a lot of challenges: the COVID-19 pandemic, the toxic political polarization, growing economic inequalities, and social dissatisfaction with economy. So with democracy. So against all of these challenges, why must we keep gender equality, women's human rights, and the participation of women in public life at the top of our agenda? Let me suggest three reasons that to me are really very important. First, because women's political participation today is key to stronger democracies tomorrow. Democracy in its essence means the rule of the people, all people. Yet we can hardly refer to democracy when significant groups of people are excluded from public affairs. If we are excluding half of our population from decision making and from having a voice, we are compromising our democracies and ignoring skills and talent. Women's continued demand for their right to participate has increased women's representation in national parliaments to the current average of 29% in the OSCE region. This is a lot of progress made, but more needs to be achieved. The 2004 OSCE Gender Action Plan, mentioned already several times, clearly says that ensuring equal rights and opportunities for women and men, and for different groups of women and men, is essential to achieving a more peaceful, prosperous, and democratic OSCE area. Countries with better gender equality and gender parity in various spheres of life are able to produce better laws and policies that benefit all. It is only when women and men, in all their diversity, have a proper seat and voice at the table that genuine democracy can be delivered. At ODIHR, we are committed to providing continuous assistance to OSCE participating states in this direction. We will be hosting a session on women's political participation this afternoon. Please do join us. We look forward to sharing our knowledge and expertise. My second reason to support gender equality is because gender equality today is key to our security. Long-term stability and peace require the inclusion of women and men on an equal basis. Just as free and fair elections guarantee political stability, research tells us that gender equality is a key indicator of a state's peacefulness. Data shows that the higher the proportion of women in parliament and in security and justice institutions, the lower the likelihood of the state carrying out human rights abuses, such as excessive use of force, political imprisonments, torture, or ill treatment. Yet, major challenges remain for achieving equality and overcoming gender-based discrimination, both within broader society and within the security and justice sector. Actions to increase gender equality, combat trafficking of women, and promote women's participation in the delivery of security remain tokenistic and have failed to achieve real change. Tomorrow, we will discuss this issue in detail in a dedicated session on women in security sector institutions. My third reason is because women need to be safe to fully participate in our democracies. When women decide to actively participate in public life, no form of violence should be tolerated. In recent years, though, growing attention has been paid to violence committed against women in public sphere. This is good, but it also shows us the scale of the problem. Female politicians, voters, journalists, and human rights defenders across the OSCE region are exposed to violence. A recent study by the Council of Europe found that 85%, so almost 9 out of 10, of women parliamentarians suffered psychological violence while in office, with almost one half of them receiving death threats or threats of rape or beating. Similarly, women who choose professions in male-dominated institutions, such as security delivery, are too often harassed or abused. How are they supposed to deliver safety and security to others if they themselves are not safe in their chosen profession? Following the Milan Ministerial Council Decision 4/18 on preventing and combating violence against women, ODIHR is developing a new service line to support participating states. This involves establishing effective strategies to address violence against women in politics and in the security sector, and to ensure adequate protection mechanisms for women in political and public life. We look forward to working together with all of you on these important issues. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have presented only 3 but powerful reasons why promoting gender equality needs to be our common priority. Witnessing in recent years a shrinking space for the women's movement across the OSCE region, it is necessary for all of us to support and protect women's organizations and gender equality advocates in their fundamental work. ODIHR will continue supporting women's civil society and networks of women leaders in their efforts towards promoting gender equality for the benefit of all our democracies. And yet I wouldn't be myself if I didn't say, in closing, that women are really powerful agents of change, and the far-reaching benefits of diversity and gender parity in leadership and in decision-making are increasingly recognized in all spheres. It is time for all of us in the OSCE to truly embrace the benefits of women leadership and commit to making sure that women are no longer underrepresented in positions of power. So let us use the next 2 days to evaluate our progress critically and with humility, to share inspiring examples and lessons learned. But most importantly, let us address the urgent work that remains for us to ensure that gender equality truly defines our democracies of tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gatapkadze. Thank you very much, dear Katarzyna, and to all distinguished speakers for your insightful remarks and valuable contribution to this opening session. As I have announced earlier, this session is open only to the speakers, and any comments, any questions, please use the next session for it. Before I conclude this high-level segment, I would like to ask everyone to turn your cameras so our colleagues will take a family photo.